The many candidates in tomorrow's parliamentary by-election at Newbury in Berkshire have been making their last pitches for support. Newbury's been Conservative since 1924. However, it's more than 4 years since the Conservatives held a seat in a by-election, and Newbury looks like going too. Our chief political correspondent, Glyn Mathias, reports.
The Liberal Democrat candidate, David Rendell, campaigning at Hungerford Market today, has placed a £20 bet on himself to win this by-election. He says a Liberal Democrat victory would force the government to change direction. He says in the last few days there's been sufficient swing towards him to overturn the Conservatives' 12,000 majority.
We have been gradually persuading people throughout the period of this campaign. We always said we would persuade enough, and I think we will persuade enough by tomorrow night.
The Conservative, Julian Davidson, canvassing a nursery school with the party chairman Norman Fowler, believes enough Conservative voters will stay loyal. The need was for confidence in the government now the recovery was starting and not a protest vote.
We've won the campaign, there is no doubt, I think, in anyone's mind about that. Tomorrow I will win the election, and Newbury will have a strong voice at the heart of government.
Labour's Steve Bilcliffe, running third, risks being squeezed by the other two parties, but he says Labour has a positive message.
People value those principles that Labour stands for. If you share those values and in your heart you're Labour, then we ask you to vote Labour on Thursday.
It seems that a proportion of the voters have yet to make up their minds, and the result in the early hours of Friday morning could yet be close. All the parties are making a final appeal to those voters who are unhappy with the government's record, but it looks as if the mood is to punish the government for the recession rather than give them credit for the recovery. Glyn Mathias, News at 10, Newbury.
As well as the candidates from the three main parties, there are 16 others standing. It's the first by-election since the general election. On tomorrow's News at 10, we'll have the first indications of how voting has gone after the polls close. And people in Newbury won't be the only ones to cast their vote. Tomorrow, 25 million people are able to vote in the county council elections in England and Wales, but not in the English metropolitan counties or Greater London. 40 years ago, 1 in 100 people suffered from hay fever. Now it's 4 in 100. In the past, people living in country areas suffered most. Now it's affecting city people too. A professor of respiratory medicine is pointing the finger firmly at car exhaust fumes. Peter Sharp reports.
Spring is here, and so is hay fever. For thousands of sufferers, the summer sun means nothing but misery. Oilseed rape brings European subsidies for farmers, but its pollen brings the first peak of the annual epidemic of hay fever. Pollen counts will be rising from now on, and figures released today show hay fever is 4 times as common as it was 20 years ago. Scientists are convinced that pollution from cars exacerbates the disease. Gases like nitrogen oxides in pollution have been shown in the laboratory to severely disrupt the beating of microscopic hairs in the nose that normally keep out pollen particles.
Recent evidence from Germany comparing east and west. In the east, where they have all the old-style pollution, children suffer from bronchitis. In the west, where that's gone, but they have the motor car and the motor car pollution, they're suffering 3 or 4 times as commonly from hay fever.
Hay fever now affects 1 in 5 people under 30, truly the disease of modern car-owning society.
House prices rose again last month. The Halifax Building Society said they went up more than 1.5%, the biggest increase for more than 4 years. If that's good news for homeowners, the bad news is that home contents insurance has been going up too. In Through the Roof, tonight's Focus on Britain, we look at how we're all paying the price of rising crime and fraudulent claims. The reporter is Tim Hewitt.
On what score?
My stereo and my television and my video.
Taking money and jewellery, and luckily there wasn't much money.
And the door was left unbolted when they went out.
There is a burglary in England and Wales every 24 seconds. It is a crime wave for which everyone must pay. Premiums for home contents insurance have soared. In some high-risk areas, they're being almost doubled. When Mavis Chapman discovered hers would cost £700 a year, she said no.
It's gone up so much, actually, now. When I made inquiries about reinsuring, I just didn't think it was worth what it would cost to insure. Silly, perhaps.
And she's not alone. Nearly all the homes in this Manchester street have been burgled, but people are increasingly unhappy about the cost of insurance.
When it went to 400, I thought, well, I can't afford that.
I don't have any home insurance contents policy at the moment because I find it's just too expensive.
To be quite honest, is it worth being insured when the premiums are so high?
Insurance claims increased slowly until the recession. Then last year, insurers paid out nearly £750 million. Annual premiums reflected the trend. Last year, they leapt to an average of £110, insurers paying more than they collected.
You've been an Abbey customer for years.
Precisely, they've been good to me.
So for some, there's worse to come. Abbey National have just put their charges up 37%, others even more.
Significant increases in crime, which we see on a regular basis through reports throughout the media, do mean that the insurance companies bear the brunt of much of that crime.
But critics say some insurance companies dabbled disastrously in the property market.
They didn't foresee the problems. Mortgage indemnity, they didn't see the collapse in the housing market coming at all. So consumers are paying for major past mistakes by the big insurers.
For many, the home insurance market has become a jungle. Charges can vary wildly, and all too often mortgage lenders recommend a certain policy because they're on a commission.
They left the key in there.
That's there. Yeah. Loss adjusters are busier than ever, but consumer groups say there is a choice. Householders who shop around can still save up to hundreds of pounds a year. And as burglaries increase and claims multiply, some insurers admit that home contents cover is business they would happily do without. Tim Hewitt, News at 10, Manchester.
Now, soccer news, and nothing seems to be going right for Liverpool's manager Graham Souness. His side lost 3-2 at Oldham tonight. Oldham stay in the bottom three. Fellow strugglers Crystal Palace managed a scoreless draw against Manchester City. In Scotland, Aberdeen beat Hearts 2-1. And finally, if your dog's barking drives you or your neighbours mad, advice today from the Department of the Environment. It published a sort of good behaviour guide for dogs and their owners. Lawrence McGinty takes up the tale.
I don't want that.
Barking is the nearest man's best friend can get to talking. Most of the time, neighbours don't mind a little interspecies conversation. And if someone suspicious approaches the front door, you want the dog to bark. Endless barking when dogs are left alone prompts a third of all complaints about noise.
We have to personally find the balance between keeping them quiet and having them bark to protect us. That's not a difficult balance because the barking problem that the Department of the Environment has discussed in their leaflet is boredom barking.
The expert's advice is to feed the dog before you go out. But there's more to it than that. The government's leaflet lists several do's and don'ts. Do let your dog know you're going out so he gets used to it. Do make him comfortable and leave a light on. And don't despair, old dogs can learn new tricks. So when Bruce Fogel leaves the house, he slips on soothing Barry Manilow music, switches on a light, and gives the dog her favourite toy.
Bye-bye.
And then she doesn't mind being home alone.
Don't even sing it well.
Bet she doesn't. And that's News at 10 from all of us here. Good night.